Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the GFCC. We're here today for a special GFCC Frame the Future series. We started this in June 2021, and today we're having a special session focused on the technology-enabled and impact-oriented university. Back in 2016, the GFCC created the GFCC University Research Leadership Forum, composed by university presidents, vice presidents, and leaders from the research community from across the globe. We've done a lot of work in that context. We created an inventory of best practices for universities to engage in innovation. We reviewed moonshot projects and how universities could be better engaged in that space. And recently, we started a conversation on the future of universities. Technology is growing at a fast pace. And as part of that initiative, really focusing on the impact-oriented, technology-enabled universities, that we're here today to talk about technology as a transformation enabler. We're very happy to have colleagues joining us from across the globe. We will introduce them in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to remind you to join this conversation. Please share your questions. We'll be pulling questions from you in attendance today and connecting with our speakers. This is an engaging conversation. This is how we want to do it. So please be part of that. Ready to get started, I want to turn to GFCC President Deborah Winsmith. After Deborah, we will have a short presentation by Professor Alexander Subich from RMIT University. Alexander has created a discussion paper that provides the basis for our conversation today. And following that, we'll have a conversation with our speakers from around the globe. So Deborah, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. And let me welcome everyone who's joining us today for one of our Frame the Future dialogue conversations that's really meant to enlist thought leaders and practitioners and activists around the world who are creating the strategies and the initiatives that will shape a new future as we emerge from the global pandemic. And of course, universities play a pivotal role in competitiveness policies and competitiveness action, and very importantly, in creating the research, the development in science and technology that's reshaping every sector of our economy throughout the globe. I'm very pleased today that in addition to Professor and President Alexander Subich, we have a fantastic group of leaders from universities, from industry, and public policy organizations that are going to share their perspective. And before we launch this conversation, let me make a few comments about the role of universities during this tremendous time of, yes, turbulence and transition, but also transformation. Universities, like every other sector of economic and social activity, are undergoing profound change. And of course, universities are at the heart educating the next generation of leaders to move into the workforce, to move into senior positions in government, in industry, in politics, etc. So they have that core responsibility of creating a learning environment and to instill in young people the passion and capacity for lifelong learning. In addition, of course, to performing cutting edge research in the challenges, the opportunities that, as I said, are changing our world. Everything from the frontiers of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology and life sciences, materials, and very importantly, ensuring that young people and scholarship continue to focus on the pivotal importance of the arts, the humanities, the social sciences, the philosophy that enable us to be human beings that have, yes, knowledge, but also as we emerge through life, to be wise, important leaders who understand what it means to be a human being. The university agenda has really been under transformation for some time, but that all, like in every other sector, has been accelerated through COVID. We've seen, of course, the ability to educate in real time with telecommunications. This has been great for some. It's not been great for others. It's a huge equity issue to ensure that all young people going back to K through 12, not just universities, have access to the digital platforms that enable real-time communication and learning. We're also seeing how autonomous systems and data-rich environments are both providing tools and capabilities, but also providing challenges, everything from cyber resiliency and cybersecurity that is critical to this new transformation world in which we are digitizing everything in real time. And we're also seeing how these converging technologies are really unleashing new practices in labor and management. You know, the university environment is one that, and we'll hear about this from our university leaders on this discussion. The university environment and the academy, as it were, is a very historic organizational structure that goes back, yes, in Europe in the Middle Ages, but goes back to the time of our universities in the Hellenistic world and our academies and other parts of the world as well that have had learning institutions. And so while the platforms are changing, the actual pedagogy, the importance of learning and equipping all of us to learn throughout life is an internal mission. So we're going to start our program today as the GFCC Executive Director Roberto Alvarez outlined with a very important presentation from Alexander Subik, who's the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Vice President for Digital Innovation at RMT in Australia. He's had an incredible career that's cut across many, many dimensions. And in addition to being one of the top educational leaders in Australia, he's certainly a global authority. So let's turn to you, Alex, and then I know Roberto will be introducing our other distinguished panelists, and we'll have a great discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for your kind welcome and introduction, and also Roberto and my colleagues on the panel. I really look forward to our discussions today. The conversation paper, the discussion paper that we have shared ahead of this panel webinar really serves as a catalyst for conversation that will take place across the panel and indeed with our participants at the webinar today. I might start with the first slide, Vanessa. If you're able to share, thank you so much. And we'll go on the view. So let me say first, continuing from Deborah's introductory remarks, that our conversation today does focus on the role of technology in enabling transformation across the university sector. And we called it University 4.0 in line with the Industry 4.0 agenda, as we have embarked as societies and industries well and truly on the fourth industrial revolution. And obviously, this transformation has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, the global pandemic we have all experienced over the last 18 months or so profoundly. It is fair to say that many industry sectors, in particular in the private sector domain, have realized the importance of digital transformation and digitalization in general, and the fourth industrial revolution, which we have embarked on, I would say, back in 2012 already, well before the virus outbreak. Digitalization was already redefining industries and the nature of work, with many services and jobs changing or becoming obsolete. And universities have been observing and embarking on that transformation, perhaps a little bit more moderately than the private sector. We have seen that COVID-19 has accelerated this transformation and amplified the impacts. In particular, during COVID, universities have almost on steroids moved through digital transformation to enable online delivery, remote delivery of educational programs and research, which was not possible otherwise due to COVID impact. that learning, that realization that has occurred over the last 2 years or so has really now led the university sectors globally to reimagine what the future would look like and to reimagine the university enterprise with a different lens, with a lens of embedding digital technologies at the core of their corporate strategies. And in fact, we are seeing evidence of a paradigm shift emerging, at least across a number of early adopters and a number of leaders across the sectors globally, where that paradigm shift transcends the entire enterprise and is looking at embedding digital technologies at the heart of the corporate strategy and the new operating models. And in fact, learnings from the private sector indicate that those that have embraced digital strategies in such a profound and robust manner and have really led that transformation from the front have had probably a better position, a better opportunity to succeed in the changing global marketplace. And university sectors are part of a global marketplace, if I can put it that way. What is also interesting is that with digitalization, the cycles of technological advances in innovation are now measured in months rather than decades. The disruptive technologies harnessed by the fourth industrial revolution, such as cloud, big data platforms, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, are all fueled by the data explosion created across hyper-connected networks and cyber-physical biological systems that are placing people at the core. And they are enabling and fueling in many ways those organizations to continually adapt and evolve and perhaps innovate in their services and their products, if done strategically and if done in a way that positions technology in line with the relevant business models and strategies. We have seen that the fourth industrial revolution has been made possible indeed by that data explosion, by the computational power and connectivity that we have developed over the years, the emerging data analytics and artificial intelligence capabilities, the new human-machine interaction capabilities, the way we are able to transform digital instructions to the physical world, and the way we're able to visualize, interpret, and put in action those insights. This is an evolving piece. This is a journey that the world has embarked on. And we have seen that this has many dimensions. This is clearly not just about technology. It is about, as Deborah mentioned in her introductory remarks, about the society, about people, about how we create value, about the skills agenda, about the future of work. It is multidimensional, and that is why it's so complex. Vanessa, can we move to the next slide, please? One of the defining features of that fourth industrial revolution, or the new evolving cyber-physical biological systems that are at the heart of the fourth industrial revolution, are really those complex systems involving physical, cyber, and human world, the hyperconnectivity between those elements, moving well beyond the traditional hierarchical and functional structures to far more distributed, complex structures where hyperconnectivity and data play a key role. Hence, part of the strategic transformation is creating connected digital ecosystems across enterprises, whether that be a university or a global corporate or any type of organization. That connected digital ecosystem is grounded on those data platforms. And those data platforms, the integrated connected digital ecosystems, allow then for AI and autonomy to stem from that kind of approach. So data is at the heart. The diagram I showed, in a way illustrates such cyber-physical systems within the manufacturing world, where indeed the fourth industrial revolution has emerged. And quickly we are seeing those concepts and those architectures and those strategies transcend into a more human-centric areas of education and research across the university sector, where we are seeing an even greater complexity emerge. Next slide, please, Vanessa. That journey is different for many sectors. The digital maturity of businesses and degree of implementation varies, and it's a dynamic piece. If we look at the various sectors and how they have progressed on that digital maturity journey, we ask ourselves, where does the university sector fit on this curve? Before COVID, well below the curve. During COVID, rapid transformation. After COVID, the new normal, we're probably seeing the University 4 sector moving up that curve, harnessing the knowledge, the learnings, the experience, the technologies, the skills that have emerged in the trade area, in the media area, all fueled by digitalization. And we have also seen indeed the health sector evolve through the digital transformation journey through COVID rapidly, because e-health and online health was the only way in many societies to provide service to the ill, to the aging, and many other parts of our societies due to COVID impact. Similar with education. Moving to the next slide, please, Vanessa. So there is an emerging, I would say, broader common understanding across the university sectors globally that innovations in education and research need to address a number of different priorities in order to cope with technological and social changes of Industry 4.0 or generated by Industry 4.0. And that include, an imperative of embedding lifelong learning approaches across the entire continuum of education and training, or in fact, placing lifelong learning at the core of new education business models across the university. And this is emerging as one of the common strategies across many reports and indeed many national digital skills strategies, including the Learning Country digital strategy that we have developed and launched in Australia a couple of months ago. And I was co-chairing that panel recently with my colleagues under the auspices of the Australian industry standards. That places a different paradigm on universities, looking at education and training as a lifelong continuum and facilitating, enabling, and supporting using digital technologies that journey. That requires a shift in how we organize and deliver our business models. Adopting personalized, flexible, and adaptive technology-enabled learning approaches. We've learned, through many examples across the sector globally, how powerful this can be. And in fact, going forward, whether we're talking about on-campus learning or blended learning or online learning, that personalized experience, that engaged experience is going to be the differentiator. And that is something that the digital technology evolution will clearly need to address. Focus on high value adding human skills that cross conventional discipline boundaries and are not easily automated. We're talking about the digital skills gap and the requirements of industry driven by the changing nature of work. But we should emphasize as well that we are not talking only about the hard skills and just the digital skills, but we are talking also about the evolving need for far more sophisticated soft skills across the industry sectors that obviously education and training and university sector need to address. And that's, when you think about, complex problem solving, working in complex, distributed, interdisciplinary teams, design thinking, systems thinking, communicating at a higher level of sophistication using also advanced visualization tools and digital tools than what has been happening in the past. These are demanding new skills that I would say conditionally we call soft skills, but they are actually high-level cognitive skills, if we want to use a more appropriate term. We're developing new directions in interdisciplinary research at the interface between technology, business, and humanity to address the emerging issues in digital economy and society. As I said at the outset, Industry 4.0 and digitalization is not about technology. At the end, it's about the society. And how does technology enable that transformation in a way where we don't leave any part of the society behind, where accessing digital skills at an appropriate level becomes a human right in this new and emerging brave new world, where accessing internet is a human right, or electricity is a human right in this brave new world, where no problem is only a singular problem within a single domain of technology or society or business, where all problems are interfaced, interconnected, interwoven, where impact arises from that interdisciplinarity. And indeed, all research points to the fact that highest impact arising from research arises from interdisciplinary context and collaborations, which is, many would say, how industry has been working for a very long time. And embracing emerging cyber-physical technologies and ways of working through new forms of public and private sector partnerships that support both education and research. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. The only way universities will stay relevant, students will be employable, and research will have impact is if we transcend to new forms of deep and broad strategic partnerships between universities and industry. This needs to take far more profound new forms of partnership rather than just transactional. And that is something that many organizations are exploring, indeed, even now, and mine included. Next slide, Vanessa. So just to summarize, in the lead up to our session today, the paper that I've shared with my colleagues Roberto and GFCC aims to serve as a catalyst for a broader conversation around a number of key questions. How will society and universities be affected by technological advancement? What technologies will have more impact on university organizations and their operations? What technology-enabled models for education, research, and impact are indeed emerging? How can universities use data and AI-driven innovations to transform how they work, not only with external stakeholders, but within organizations? How do we drive staff engagement, student engagement, experience of our people enabled by new technologies? How can universities best use technology to transform and create value in the society? So these are just some of the questions, and clearly there will be more emerging through a deeper conversation with our colleagues on the panel and our colleagues attending this webinar. Thank you, Roberto. I will leave it at this point.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. So, Deborah, would you like to quickly introduce our speakers here? How would you like to proceed? And while you are getting ready for that, maybe my colleagues in the GFCC, Simone and Vanessa, if you could share here the link for where people in attendance can download the paper that Alex has created, and also other documents and publications like this. I mentioned that we've done lots of things in the Universal Research Leadership Forum. So this is an inventory of 52 types of tools that universities have to engage in innovation. It's available in on the same place. So Deborah, over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you. And I don't know if you're going to call on our panelists in this order, so I will introduce them, and then we can proceed with our sequence of speakers. But we're delighted that Sebastian Espinosa, the Managing Director of Coding Dojo, is going to be speaking shortly. A premier coding school with success in the accelerated learning through the bootcamp model. And I think you're one of the innovators and disruptors in education, turning thousands of students from a variety of backgrounds and skill levels into professional developers, which of course increasingly are skill sets that are relevant to every sector of economic activity as well. And we're very pleased, of course, that your work was featured in the GFCC Skills Report, Sebastian. It's always a great privilege and honor to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Gianna Sagazio, who is the Innovation Director of the Brazilian National Industry Confederation. In this role, Gianna is responsible for the policy issues related to innovation. She's the leader, the founder, really the passion behind the Brazilian coordination of entrepreneurial mobilization with all the leading enterprises of Brazil. She has a tremendous background, having been with the Brazilian National Economic Development Bank, the UN and things. And I hope I'm not being premature in announcing that she's just been appointed by the Brazilian Ministry of Science and Technology to serve on the National Council for Science and Technology in Brazil. So congratulations, Gianna, for your tremendous leadership. Bill Kirkland is the Executive Director of the Office of Innovation at the University of South Carolina. Bill brings a tremendous background in, yes, working inside the university on its innovation strategy and the interconnectivity and interdisciplinary research, but he's very much engaged with building the innovation ecosystem in South Carolina, across the country and beyond. And Bill, thank you for all of your leadership, but also your innovation and university industry government partnerships that are such a hallmark of the University of South Carolina. Anish Garifulina is a PhD student at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. OIST has been one of the really innovative, relatively new emerging university institutions and models. They don't have departments at the school. And we're very pleased that OIST is a member of the GFCC. And Anish has received her degree in chemistry from the Nazarbayev University in Astana, Kazakhstan. And many of you know we had the great privilege and honor to have the GFCC 2019 annual meeting and Global Innovation Summit in Kazakhstan, hosted by the Kazakh Council on Competitiveness and other partners. And we're interested to hear about your research in biosensing and microfluidics. And then very proud to recognize one of our council members of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, serving on our National Innovation Commission, Dr. Sridhar Sudarsan, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Spark Cognition. This is really a frontier company in the United States, creating AI and machine learning applications in areas from data science, cybersecurity, clean energy market, across the gamut of applications, and using the tools of predictability and AI machine learning to enable real-time decision-making, as well as business competitive advantage. Prior to joining Spark, Sridhar served as the CTO and chief architect of IBM's Watson. So he, of course, brings an incredible background to his work. And we're excited, actually, at the U.S. Council that Sridhar is working on the concept of creating AIs for policymakers too. So anyway, we're thrilled to have this great group of leaders today. So I'll turn it over to you, Roberto, of how you want to proceed with the introduction of comments, and then we'll have our discussion.
Thank you, Deborah. So we'll have a quick initial round here, maybe like 3 minutes for each one of you to reflect on transformations that are being brought about by technology growth in society, universities, skills, and how those things connect in some way. Before we do that, just want to call the attention of everybody that we already have some resources being shared here on the chat, and also that we already started to collect questions from the audience. So please do that. Sridhar, I wanted to turn to you. As Deborah said, we could hardly find someone who would be better positioned than you to talk about AI and data and the transformations that are being brought about the growth of AI in the globe. So how is it going to change society, skills, how we work? Over to you, Sridhar.
Well, first of all, thank you, Roberto, and thank you, Deborah, for that very kind introduction and for having me on this panel. And Alex, what an amazing sort of set of insights that you shared earlier here. Hopefully, very engaging sort of conversation to follow over the next, hour or so. So Roberto, in terms of how I have, having been at sort of the center of the digital transformation journey over the last, 20 years or so, from a technology provider perspective, I have had the privilege and the honor to work across a large variety of industries. And one of the things that I have observed over time is the speed of growth of data, right? And I think what we typically find is that the amount of data being generated is doubling every 3 years. So if you sort of take that in perspective, and 3 years, I think, is kind of where it was about a year ago. I think that even that window is now narrowing in terms of how quickly and how rapidly data is evolving. So what does that mean? And I think we all realize that, we all recognize that. A lot of this data is, unstructured. 85% of this data is unstructured. It is stored in a lot of different places. If you think about social media data, if you think about, the fact that in the next 2 years, over 60% of customer call records are all going to be automated and digitized. So what that really means is we all, as consumers, we're buying things, we're using things. Anytime you interact with your, with retailers, with purchasing as part of the supply chain, all of that is going to become digital. And we're already sort of a part of that journey, but it's going to continue to grow rapidly. If you look at the industrial world, a car has over 100 million lines of code. If you think about it, and the amount of data that gets collected from cars is incredible. What that has led to is safety procedures. If we look at, we're all sort of, as we continue to drive newer models of vehicles, we find the fact that, vehicles are able to better sense lane changing, distances between cars and safe braking distances and so on, leading all the way to the other end of the spectrum around autonomous driving. If you look at the industry, the industrial space, from a perspective of how trains and how aircrafts are being run, there's an entire network and a system of how this is continuing to evolve and expand. We also talk about the collaboration of new areas of research, things that we had not even really considered to be a potential area of being able to look at, is now becoming a reality quickly. Why? For two reasons. Number one, I think some of the core sets of things that we as humans, activities and tasks that we as humans were performing, even as recently as 10 to 20 years ago, is continuing to evolve rapidly. So as we automate sets of tasks and sets of activities, whether they're hazardous activities in harsh conditions, like in the mining industry, like in hazardous oil and gas platforms, energy platforms, power stations, etc., we're finding that what that allows us to do as humans is to look at even higher orders of problems, be able to spend that much time in terms of researching those areas, finding even more solutions, and applying AI in terms of solving that. So that's what the growth and the speed, the rate at which the infrastructure and processing has evolved, the growth at which the technologies, machine learning and AI, has suffered its winter back in the 70s and the 80s. But has come back with a very rapid growth in terms of how we are evolving and applying these technologies. So every single industry that we look at, every single job or role that we are working with every single incoming student and disciplines that they're working on trying to get an education in and trying to get into the into academia or into industry over the next 20 to 30 years, if we sort of plan our outlook and look ahead over the to the 2050 timeframe, is going to be governed by the use and by the application of data and associated AI technologies. And as we all, as individuals, are playing a different role in this particular set of ecosystems, whether it's climate change, whether it is, universities, for example, if you look at specific areas of research, for example, that are taking place, they're continuing to evolve quite rapidly. And in terms of looking at, for example, how universities are looking at algorithms and approaches to personalized learning, I think if you look at Fortune 500 companies, distance learning has continued to explode over the last year or so. And this is not just true for academia and traditional universities proceeding more into distance learning, but it's also inclusive of how Fortune 500 companies are using distance learning to skill and reskill and continuously skill their workers to be able to adopt and evolve into the growth. So the future of work is certainly continuing to evolve. Sensorization, IoT, with 50 billion devices and counting, continuing to get connected. Alex talked about hyperconnectivity with health, digital health systems. All of these areas are going to continue to evolve in terms of how we grow the space. And we speaking of online, online sort of education and online universities. It's fascinating because I think the Open University in Britain's largest online university, the Open University, provided conclusive evidence that online learning courses lead to 85% less carbon dioxide emissions per student and consume 90% less energy than in classroom education. A very different angle to looking at distance learning around how we can improve and encourage sustainability as well. So I think it's the biggest one takeaway that I'll make, and I'll conclude my remarks here, is that the fundamental nature of what is evolving and changing is the speed between learning and the applicability of that learning. While even if we go to 15 or 20 years ago, there was a good 10 to 15 years before a new technology would come into place and before the time it gets adopted in the marketplace, in the industries. That gap is narrowing. What does that mean? That means we all have a responsibility to figure out how we accelerate learning, how we accelerate the applicability of that learning, how we accelerate relearning, because in our lifetimes, we would likely all have to go through multiple relearning milestones, even as compared to 20 years ago. That also implies an acceleration in regulation and policy making to how we can apply these in terms of the new sets of students coming into the workplace and us as part of the industry absorbing them as well as providing them with the right opportunities. So I think that gap, that shortened gap, is really what I think will drive a lot of the changes that we're talking about here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sridhar. Speed, that's the word. And one question that I'll leave here for you to address later is, how is technology changing education? What are you seeing coming from an industry? How can we actually use data, to improve learning? But I want to move to you, Bill. You are at the University of South Carolina, right? But you are dealing with a different dimension, more specifically, that's not education per se, but industry engagement, research, innovation. So how do you see those transformations in technology changing what do you do, and mostly how can universities tap into the potential of data and digitalization in that space, Bill?
And thank you, Roberto and Deborah, for allowing me to speak. And I do want to thank Alex for pointing out something very important about higher education. And a lot of people doubt us and think that we're in the old world, not the new world. But when COVID, as we all know, back in March, February, March, came upon us, and I'm sure Alex and the folks can, at their own universities, we went from our spring break, our students all go out in March, and they didn't come back. And we continued, and we quickly went from in-person to online and distance learning, if you like to call it, or just call it distance learning. We quickly moved there and adapted. So I guess the teaching point for everybody on the phone, if you're from industry, academia can do it and do it quickly when we need to. And I think Alex would shake his head and agree to that. We're very proud of that, aren't we, Alex? We're actually very proud of that. But we did go from spring break to online and carried it through a hybrid model on and off through all of last year's academic year. And we're very proud. We're in person. In about 2 weeks, we're about 52,000 students across 8 campuses. So we're not a small university. And then the only thing I would say, Sridhar, is I think you and I met years ago. IBM was one of our lead partners. Ed Macko and Lori Steele and others, and you made a significant investment in our university, and I do appreciate that. So thank you, sir, for that several years ago. And I'm a former IBMer, so I'll say that for you. But I would like to say, as you look at Alex's study, and Alex, thank you so much for your paper. I'm very happy. About 8 years ago, I joined the university under Dr. Pasti's vision and leadership from industry and a startup, which I was fortunate enough to sell. We've kind of gone from wave 1 to wave 2 into wave 3 over the last 8 years, when industry 4.0 was industry kind of half a dot, all right, 1.0. And really the key to that, and I'm more than happy to speak to any university after this, Roberto, obviously, as part of our partnership supporting you guys, is we quickly realized, and being a former industry guy, that we need to have foundational partners. And one was IBM. IBM led to Siemens. Siemens led to Yaskawa, which is a very large Motoban, which is a very large Japanese robotics company, which also now has led to others. But what we did, and with Siemens and IBM, is we quickly invested with IBM on the Internet of Things at the time. It was Watson went to IoT and set up an executive briefing center at the university. The goal behind that, we still do basic research, Roberto. We always do. That's the foundation of the university. We're Carnegie R1 University. But we quickly realized the future is in applied research. Future is in industry research. So we at the University of South Carolina we have a really good partnership with those folks. And we have an Iot Digital Transformation Lab. And what that is an industry hub. And it's where industry comes and presents a problem to our researchers, to our faculty, but also our students. We have capstone projects. And we tackle those industry real life problems. And we quickly turn that into a solution or a prototype. And then the industry takes it back to the customer, whoever. And then the interesting thing is we're a partner network. I know that's unusual for the university to be part of a referral network. We actually get to participate in the sale or the recurring sales of whatever solution we built. And what that's led to is really creative. We are in line with most of our big partners like Boeing, like BMW, like Michelin, et cetera. And then with Siemens, and I'm sure that a lot of the universities online have worked with Siemens before, but they have a very interesting academic program where we actually received 4 years ago, over $600 million in Siemens product lifecycle management software, their advanced manufacturing software. And what we've done is that we've integrated that into our engineering curriculum. So our students are learning on real industry grade software. And then also we've integrated that into some of our research. So in our digital transformation lab, which is 30,000 square feet now, it shows everything from a visual inspection using a robot on fiber materials to paint materials, et cetera, which are real industry grade solutions using Yaskawa robots and others. But also what we're doing now, Roberto, which is really interesting for industry, we're actually linking to Amazon Web Services, AWS, and doing a cloud computing inside of our lab, which I hope that Sridhar and everyone is shaking their head. That is not as exciting, new, very new for a university. We're building out what I like to call our Future Factory Lab. And it's got the cyber component, it's got the cloud computing component, and then we are actually showing, I'll say Industry 5.0, with Alice doesn't mind me calling it that, but we're showing from start to finish, actually even having unmanned craft reading the bars and and tracking things as they move across the manufacturing floor, using a lot of interesting software. So really, really, really excited about it. It's working for us. It's the intersection of, Roberto, of industry and the university, and doing real life applied research. Our students are learning in real life experiments, or real life prototyping, that then they go out in the industry. I'm proud most of our students that are in this lab have been hired by either the company, the IBM or Siemens, or by the client they're building a solution for. So we're creating an educated pipeline, real life pipeline. The other thing we have done here at the university in the last 3 years is we've actually have an artificial intelligence institute that we created. What makes us different than the block and tackling normal institute? It's a cross discipline. It covers everything from engineering to our medical school, to our nursing, to public health, and also social work. So we're taking more of an integrated approach to AI, looking at health disparities, looking at population health, and et cetera, working with one of our large health systems. And the last thing I'd bring out, Roberto, which is really, really important, here in South Carolina, we're the 5th fastest growing manufacturing state in the country. So we started out looking at product lifecycle management, supporting the governor and our Secretary of Commerce, and how they recruit companies to South Carolina. We're part of that recruiting team. But what we've just engaged in 6 months ago, we're halfway through it, is we're currently doing a statewide cyber ecosystem review. And this isn't we're talking about C++. We're not talking about doing coding. This is more operational cyber. What does IBM look for? What do companies look for? They want to come to South Carolina. They're looking for that workforce operationalizing cyber, not just being able to do offensive and defensive cyber. We can do that. We have really smart folks doing that, but we're focused more on the operational side. So we'll have that by the end of the year, and I'll be sharing that with you and Deborah, the ecosystem review. And then that's around workforce development, and then how we use that review to streamline the university system, which is other universities, also government and industry, and servicing the current companies here, but also as part of a recruiting tool for the state of South Carolina. So a lot going on here. I look forward to working with everyone. Sindar, I love that you and I have a conversation after this, a reconnect. It'd be greatly. I'm glad to see you again, sir.
Likewise, Bill.
And Roberto, I don't have any foods for thought other than how do we all collaborate and with inside the academia to help support industry.
Thank you, Bill. I took note on one thing that you mentioned that maybe we could keep on the radar: foundational partners. So I understand that recruiting industry or recruiting industry partners is essential to transform the university. So that's my takeaway here. And thanks for sharing that. Einash, I wanted to turn to you. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's super early in Okinawa now. You are a research student, so you are seeing transformation happening while you are being trained as a researcher. So how do you see the issues related to industry, technology, and university intersecting now and going forward, especially? Einash, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me part of this. It's a really interesting question because the thing is, while being a PhD student right now, it's actually quite different from all of the previous experience that people had before. Because in the middle of my studies, the pandemic has happened, and then everything just switched to being online. And so there were a lot of things like conferences getting canceled and internships getting canceled, and which meant that potential job opportunities also didn't happen. And all of that just applied a lot of pressure. But the upside of having all of this data and all of this technology is that there was a lot of options to have online learning, which is great. But also at the same time, it is a little bit difficult because you just have so many different classes that you can take. And it's just this whole pressure of what should I choose and when should I do it? And also how to combine all of these possible options with the research that I'm doing at the same time as taking the classes. And it's great that there's this option of having so many different classes to take. But also, I think in the future, it would be great if there would be a little bit of personalized learning, as it has been mentioned already. So for example, right now it's 6 a.m. in Japan, and it would be great if sometime in the future there would be something like taking the class at the best sort of time for you, instead of just the time when it's being offered. So what I mean is that there are a lot of people who are better at learning something during the night rather than during the morning. And when it comes to traditional learning, we are sort of used to having classes from 9 a.m., for example, in the morning. But I know so many people who are just not ready to just take in at 9 a.m., but they are much better in the afternoon, for example. So it would be just great to have an option of that in the future, and just modify the traditional format of learning potentially. And the same to do with sort of any sort of experience. And also the whole option of having this online learning is also, I think, is getting better with time, because there is this a little bit of effect of having engaged learning rather than just listening to a lecture, because I've been a student for over 20 years now, and it is getting different from just listening to a lecture. And I like that lately, especially during the last year, it's been quite common to listen to a lecture and asking questions during the time of listening to a lecture, or having a separate forum where students are allowed to discuss something while the lecture is still happening. And I think that helps with just sort of taking in the information a little bit better and just understanding what's happening and not missing out on the lecture itself. And yeah, and so I just think I'm quite hopeful about where it's going now, but also we are kind of at the very start, and there's a lot to be done. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing that in maybe a time that's not optimal, right? So, and what you have mentioned, two things come to my mind. We are in the early stage of this transformation, right? And there are things that we have not accomplished yet that you as a student, or as a young researcher, would you like to have? And what I want to keep here for our next round is, what are some of the dreams that you have about the whole university experience, in terms of things that we should have that maybe technology could enable us? But we'll have time for that. Sebastian, I want to turn to you. As Deborah said in the beginning, you are in some way our disruptor here. You are one of the leaders for one of the top technology boot camps in the world, Coding Dojo, right? And Coding Dojo, as Deborah said, was featured in the GFCC Future Skills Report, together with the program that Alex leads in Australia, the Advanced Higher Apprenticeship Industry 4.0 program, right? So I think there are two things here. One is you are training people in a fast pace, building on speed that Sridhar brought to the conversation, to engage in technology, engage in industry. At the same time, you are using a different model, and you are using technology to enable that. Could you explain that to us and maybe explore the connections that you see with the conversation?
Totally. And thanks a lot, Roberto, Deborah, for the invitation, and everybody in the panel. It's awesome to be here with you. Yeah, just to, first of all, to make an intro, Coding Dojo is a coding and technology skills academy. Okay, it was created. Let's say our mission is to transform lives through programming literacy, and what we do is basically do fast and focused training, right? Focus in really transform lives and try to give the skills necessary for students to get a better job after they graduate. Okay, we receive students from all backgrounds, from a truck driver to a business people with masters and even PhDs that want to learn these technologies and get a better life, get a better salary, a better program, better job in the future, and we do that in a matter of weeks or months instead of a matter of years. Right now, we have programs that are programs in full stack development, in different languages, in data science, in cybersecurity, in UX, UI, and design, DevOps, QA testing, etc. What we do is that we are very connected with the market. We try to see what is needed, and we do background engineer and try to create the programs from what is needed, right? And that connection, we never forget that connection in what is required. I would say, Roberto, that we're seeing all around the world a huge need for upskilling and reskilling, right? In this transformation, as the difference, I will say, what I have seen is that the middle class jobs are the ones that are being disappeared, that are disappearing, and are being replaced by other kind of jobs, like the truck drivers, the accountants, the interpreters. All these kind of jobs are being replaced by AI, right? Or by software as a service, etc. When that happens to your job, right? You have two options. You have the option to get a job that is poorer in quality, with a lower salary, without social benefits, with little possibility of growth. That would be what we call right now the gig economy, right? Being an Uber driver, being or whatever other kind of job that is in that kind of gig economy. And if you know about this, you have the option to retrain fast and get inside the train of technology, right? And basically retrain yourself and find a high quality job, right? A highly qualified job. And this may sound maybe impossible, but we have seen over and over again that it's possible. That students from, as I was mentioning, from all different backgrounds can take a program that is super intensive, but they can learn the basics of learning how to learn, right? Learning the basics skills and understanding the job market in technology. And then with those skills, get a new job in the technology sector, right? And from there, continue learning and continue improving their careers, right? So basically, it's a huge challenge for everyone, right? And we have been participating in different projects, right? Private and public projects to train individuals, and we have seen that the most successful programs, projects, are the ones that where different areas of society are involved, right? On the one hand, you have educational institutions and academia, right? That can understand what is required in the market, what needs to be taught, and then educational institutions also that actually teach and create the curriculum, right? And companies that really participate in that creation of the curriculum. They say, in my market, I need, I don't know, in the mining industry in the north of Chile, we need data scientists, right, with this and this and this characteristics, and they can help building that curriculum, and then instructors and then students as well that can participate and give feedback, and you also participate in this constant improvement of the curriculum, right? So I agree with, I guess, everybody that has been here talking about in their experiences, and I think that we need to prepare students for a life of constant learning, right? That's the thing, and because they are going to need that in their work, and to stay current, to stay active in the tech industry. So that's what we're trying to do, and with these short and intense programs, it's just a start for what they're going to continue learning and the future jobs.
Thank you, Sebastian. I will leave one question here for you. How can we do that at scale, training not just thousands but millions? Yeah, and how can we scale up the type of program that you have? Gianna, but maybe do you have a quick comment on that? Would you like to quick comment on that now?
A quick comment. I will say it's we need participants from different areas of society, and we need to also create programs that are scalable, but training trainers by educating others to create programs, right? It's not just a centralized thing, but a decentralized way of teaching.
Decentralization, training the trainer. This is something that Alex, you've been doing a lot, and that's our motto. So we'll circle back to you. Gianna, just for us to finalize this last round, you are looking at a country, big country, Brazil, full of challenges, right? And you are between policy and industry. So, and a critical issue is to develop skills. So what's your take on the opportunities, the issues that are rising in terms of technology growth and digitalization?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Deborah and you for the invitation, and also for our great partnership. I'm very happy to represent the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry in this very important initiative of GFCC. Well, in terms of policy, it's likely we don't have a simple or a one-size-fits-all answer. We may assume that people, schools, and business, especially SMEs, need support to get the right data and, above all, embrace the adoption of digital technologies. It means not only funding, but also a protective framework that ensures the respect to values such as privacy. In the Brazilian case, perhaps the most important point is to ensure that the workforce has the right skills to lead this process. Brazilian students and professionals must be equipped with the competencies to meet the demands of the workplace. But we have an important gap in STEM education. Therefore, we have to develop a pipeline of talent with strong soft and hard skills in STEM that is responsible for the rapidly changing job landscape. Well, CNI, as representative of all industries in Brazil, has worked hard to strengthen the industry in Brazil and launched 13 years ago the Business Mobilization for Innovation, together with the 400 biggest business leaders in Brazil. May have organized 2 working groups bringing together representatives from companies, government, and educational institutions to address issues like that, which impact the economic performance. One of our main goals is to bring companies closer to universities in order to integrate market and education. And this is a fundamental part of the learning process. In this sense, whatever the path to be adopted by countries in terms of policy framework, we believe that the partnerships between the public and private sectors, business and scientific community are essential to face and solve the challenge of our center and of the future.
Thank you, Gianna. So the word for me is partnership. So bridging, yes. So connecting. I think that we heard that from many people. So maybe we could have like really quick conversation now. We have many questions, and one question that I do have, but we also have here in the Q&A, I think it comes from Jerry, it's how we can actually use technology to improve learning, yeah? And can we actually use technology to do that? How can we accelerate learning? Is technology capable of providing the skills that are needed for this new cohort of students? Alex, I would turn to you to reflect on that, but also invite everybody. And also the other question, Alex, is maybe this about scale. How do you can use data at scale at the university level? How can you have this upskilling and reskilling programs at scale, as Sebastian has mentioned? Over to you, Alex.
Thank you. There are two questions, and I might reflect on each one of them separately, and obviously my colleagues on the panel can provide more insights. The first one, as we've all seen, even before COVID, but in particular during this period of mass volume kind of transition to online education and digitally enabled education, almost all universities are using some type of digital learning management system, right? Whether that be Canvas, or whatever, Blackboard, whatever, any of those platforms. And in fact, also supported by many interactive collaborative digital tools like Collaborate Ultra or any other type. So most universities are now embracing those technologies because they are the enablers of that high mass volume kind of delivery of digitally enabled education. Now the next wave of using these technologies more smartly is really grounded in data. When you develop a connected, integrated data platform across the university that connects and actually accesses student-generated data from those learning management systems, whether that be data, gauging their access, the timeliness of access, the problem areas where they spend more time or less time, all the different dimensions that gauge student behavior through the learning process, accessing that data on volume and generating intelligent insights from that data is an immensely powerful tool. It allows you to maybe improve retention because they are the early warning signs. It's not the assessment that's the early warning sign of whether students are struggling. It's the access of learning systems and engaging with the learning systems and processes of the university that are early signs. You get that information. You get information that's valuable in terms of improving and indeed designing new courses and programs. You get behavioral information in terms of how students collaborate, what generates that collaboration more, what sparks the interest. That data, in terms of the insights it provides, it's an invaluable resource going forward. And in similar manner, you can use similar data also regarding staff engagement, right? So that is already emerging. We are seeing, integrated data platforms emerging. We're seeing some early usage of AI to actually generate insights from that data and so on. That is extremely important. And this is where organizations are moving to a kind of an intelligent, innovative kind of a horizon rather than just delivery horizon, right? In terms of scaling up what you've mentioned, scaling up the transformation, you know that both across Australia, where I lead the National Network of Industry 4.0 test labs and pilots. One way to scale up is really, and Bill reflected on that as well, on his industry hub. Industry hubs are a very powerful construct, and I like them very much because they are open, supportive environments, non-competitive environments. They are inviting. This is where industries across a select sector or sectors can come, engage with the teams, engage with staff and students, share their problems, co-design, co-invest even, and co-deliver even aspects of education and research. So those comprehensive industry hubs in areas of focus aligned with the right sectors are one powerful way to achieve that. And I've done that on national basis. In each state, there are industry hubs together. They probably bring together now almost 200 companies and a few thousand students around the Industry 4.0 journey. And obviously that's scaling up. Similar, as Bill mentioned, similar construct can work at university level, right? If a university focuses on particular industry sectors or particular areas of society and industry where I feel they have the capability and strategic objective, you can build those hubs within universities, which basically start transforming the university within, where the boundaries are blurred between the university campus and industry and society, where it becomes kind of a melting pot of ideas, where you invite the outside in, so that you basically introduce and invite the external key stakeholders into the education and research process. I think blurring the boundaries, structurally and functionally is very important. But, as I've mentioned a few times before, that, Roberto, this also means that academia, needs to have that humility in order to work effectively with industry and society, because that requires a bit more humility as well.
Roberto.
Thank you. Yes, Jana, over here.
I would like to give the example of the industry in Brazil. As the industry system, we have SENAI, the National Service for Industrial Training. And at SENAI, we have 80 institutes of technology and innovation all over Brazil. SENAI is one of SENAI's branches and has significantly expanded its scope in professional education due to the pandemic. To keep on with the focus of training professionals in industry, SENAI has offered 100,000 vacancies in the online courses since the beginning of the pandemic. So we are training millions of students and workers with digital technologies. I believe that this is a very good example how to integrate technologies and to prepare people for the future.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for sharing that, because you were bringing another aspect to the conversation. That's the geographical distribution, how you do that, and you distribute training and capabilities across a big country like Brazil. So thanks for bringing that. Alex, a quick follow-up question. When you talk about leveraging the potential of data integration, pulling data and understanding student behaviors, who's at the forefront of that? Who is your benchmark? Who's doing that at the best at this moment?
That's a hard question, but I might reflect maybe just on one, so that we avoid competition across the board. And it won't be my institution, because we are evolving obviously there as well, just like many others. The one bright example that I see as a very innovative development is with the Western Governors University in US, where they've integrated their structured data. They've even developed rigorously descriptors of key skills that basically allow them to look at pathways between qualifications and degrees and training and education across that continuum that I mentioned in a seamless manner. And that structured data, integrated structured data platform, I think represents an extremely valuable asset that you can build on, especially when you understand, different education and training programs from the point of view of the skills that are developing, rather than some rote descriptors. And when I mention skills, you will find from most reports coming out of industry, including also organizations such as GFCC and World Economic Forum as well, indeed, that basically when we talk about skills, we're not talking about skills only from the perspective of vocational education or polytechnic kind of education, but also in advanced education, whether that be, bachelor's, master's, PhD degrees, because skills are increasingly becoming the focal point, for industry and business. The skills that allow you to do the work that you need to do, irrespective of the level of education and training. So having those skills descriptors that are data-driven and data and evidence-based, and that allow that continuum and interface seamlessly across the education and training domains is a valuable platform. And I suspect we will see more of that happening, that kind of development.
Thank you, Alex. What sticks to my mind is that to do what you have just outlined, universities need CIOs, CDOs, chief digital officers, right? And that's a critical function that maybe not many around the globe have well developed. Einash, I want to turn to you and back to your dream as your journey as a young researcher. What are maybe some of the levers or some of the things that you see that are missing today that could be addressed going forward with technology and new models?
You mean education-wise?
Education-wise and research-wise in your academic experience.
So I think the major downside, I guess, that I can think of right now is that most of the online learning that is being offered nowadays is primarily in English, and it's very difficult to find any sort of subtitles or any other resources, which makes it very difficult for people who are not necessarily fluent in English to learn. And that sort of contributes to this whole gap of more developing countries going ahead and then underdeveloped countries just staying where they are. And I think that could be easily solved by just adding subtitles to any sort of educational material. And then there's also this whole, I guess, also downside of online learning where it comes to, if you're not present during the lecture, then it's difficult to just follow up with your questions. And this also could just be solved with having a 24-hour TAs that could just take turns, couple hours at a time, or I don't know, just have online TAs that could just answer your questions briefly, or maybe just have a forum where people could discuss something. And there's also, I guess, as a idealistic student in the future, I would hope that there would be, rather than just providing online resources for people to learn, there would actually be something, I don't know, where a lecturer would check on the engagement, as it has been mentioned, just to see that people are actually taking in the information rather than just listening to a lecture, because it is very difficult to concentrate during a lecture, and sometimes just by watching the whole material, it doesn't mean that you understood everything and that you will actually use those skills in the future. And it's also very easy to just listen to something and pass the exam and just forget about it immediately. And it would be great just to have some sort of a platform where with time you would actually be tested on how well you took in the material and how well you can actually use those skills in the future. And I do understand that ideally with being employed and everything in the future, you will actually, I mean, people who understood the material the best would go ahead and be the best at what they do. But also just educational platform wise, I think that is an area that could be paid more attention to, I guess.
So in some way, adaptive learning at scale, right? So thanks for sharing that. Sridhar, once again, what's your, as a technology leader, what's the potential that you see, and what types of solutions we could have in place, maybe to address some of the things that we have heard here today from Alex, Einash, and others?
And there's some fascinating points that Einash made earlier as well around engagement of the student on a topic. And to me, that is such a powerful thing and embodies so many different aspects. I think the language example that you brought up earlier, Einash, is an excellent one. And if I may zoom out of that, it actually broadens quite a bit, because to me, it's all about leveling the playing field in terms of language, location, the ability to learn, the accessibility. Some people grasp things a lot faster the first time, some people the second time. It also depends on your mental state at the point of which you're engaging on a particular platform. So there's so many different factors that go in. To me, this is a technology around personalized learning that we are really trying to triangulate to. And personalized learning comes in so many different forms, but the objective for that, in terms of how you can enable it, but the objective for that is really all about, if Einash is taking a course and I'm taking a course, she's in Japan and I'm in Austin, Texas, and we're both sort of learning the same, focusing on the exact same topic, how can we assimilate things in a different way? And how can we then personalize the follow-on to those conversations in a very different way, so that we're both absorbing things in different ways? So I think we're already seeing, by the way, a lot of these kinds of personalized approaches that are being applied in the industry, which I think is very, very relevant to apply in universities from a schooling perspective. So as an example, if you think about simple sort of conversations that you probably see, personalized search as an example, right? It's a common thing that I think we all use. There's a lot that has advanced just in the last 15 years in terms of how personalized search works. Where if you're looking up for something, Roberto, and if I'm looking up for something, we find different results. Why is that? It's because there are some context that has been added to it. I think it's the same thing that applies with learning, not just in the universities, by the way. This is what I'm seeing is also occurring in learning at the workplace. In the industry, we're facing the exact same problem about how people are skilling and reskilling and continuously upskilling themselves. And I think there are technologies that are being applied that can be brought to the university. A second thing that I will also mention here is speed. One challenge that we've had in the past is how long a certain thing takes, whether it's a degree, whether it's a research project, whether it is a discovery of sorts. And that time lapse, that time span has significantly compressed, right? Case in point, we look at just how quickly the vaccinations have developed in just the last year, of discovering a new virus, to discovering new vaccines, to applying the vaccines, to learning quickly. I mean, that entire span is now compressed within less than 18 months. We're still on the journey, versus it was unthinkable even a year ago if this was even possible. Now, if you take that and apply that into the academia, into universities, there are technologies out there today. There are platforms, including some of the ones that we work at Spark Cognition, which allows the ability to compress the time required to run experiments, for AI to provide hypotheses, to provide tests, to be able to validate that, and to augment so that the student is sort of looking at it at a higher level. So another set of things which will allow to get to the speed of where we want to go to without really compromising on the quality, because that's just as important. We just don't want to move fast and not worry about quality. I think we all will be impacted by that. Mm-hmm. The third thing I would mention is teaching. On the teaching side, AI augmented teaching. I don't think AI is ever going to replace teachers, but AI is always going to allow teachers to focus on more higher order problems and not worry about sort of the base level of scenarios. So these are sort of three very broad areas that I think are different, but very relevant in terms of how you can apply that in the learning space.
Thank you, Sridhar. Sebastian, quickly, how do you how do you weather this thing about the speed in your model, right? And at the same time, how can you personalize the experience, leveraging the very own technology that you are training people to use and develop?
Right, it's a challenge, right? But we try to one thing that was mentioned here is motivation as well. I mean, it's crucial that we put students in the center of what they're learning and in the learning experience. So motivation is crucial, and we try to push for that motivation in students from day one to final day, right? It's also about metrics, as was mentioned here as well. So we have our learning platform and learning system allows to gather all this data where we can personalize learning every day. So every day we see metrics. We try to define ourselves as a data company in education, right? So, and we gather that data every single day about engagement, about heat maps, about how students learn on screening time, content. We also evaluate, right, so of content NPS and instruction NPS, collaboration, and directly about quizzes and other things, right? So we have like 65 data points that allow us to understand, interpret how students learn and optimize that learning every single day. And that's what we try to do, to really focus, to really separate and understand how every student is learning and try to improve the educational experience every single day.
Thank you. So we are approaching the end of our session. We have amazing questions here. And maybe Bill and Gianna, I could tee you up before we go for a quick final round. And the one question that we have here, Bill, I think it's related to something that you mentioned, change strategies. So we got a question from Waleed. What type of change management strategy is needed to drive the digitalization at the university space?
Yeah, just focusing just on the partnerships, Roberto. Dr. Pastis, 8 years ago, I'm from industry, as we mentioned. He came to me and they were one of my clients from my company. And he said, we don't understand what industry wants or needs. And we really don't understand what we're doing inside that could even match up to that. So that was a huge movement from a president to say, we're good at certain things, but we don't know what the outside wants or needs. And that was you're talking about change management, just changing vision and approach. He invited me in, and they said the dark side, because I was from industry, inside academia. And we then molded and created a business unit within the university that covers corporate, covers intellectual property licensing, entrepreneurship, a research part, and then we managed, like I said, the relationship with the governor and the Secretary of Commerce. So he brought someone in from industry, which is a major move 8 years ago, and we've had success from that. So that was, I'll call it changing strategy or vision for a university that's very large. It was aircraft carrier being changed directions, and we've been very successful at it. One last thing I'll say, and kind of take from Alex's comments, something to watch. I love that conversation, Alex, separate of this, is in Australia and others, we're now having industry come to us and say, I'll give you X money if you will train or teach your students this. And then I like to have first access to those students to hire them in the future. And that's career development, whatever you want to call it. That's a trend that I'm having conversations every day. How do you do it without jeopardizing the academic environment, or what you would like to call that? And the second thing is grant dollars in the US are flat. And we have to do industry partnerships and investments from industry on these prototypes and creative ways to participate in the downstream revenue of whatever that product is. We have to get more creative, because that is where the revenue dollars to support basic research are going to come from. I hope that answers your question, Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Gianna, over to you. Before we go to our final round, a quick reflection again on driving change at the systems level, right? And back to your topic on partnership, what's the secret sauce for that?
Roberto, I think that is to be open to the dialogue. We are coordinating this huge mobilization on innovation for more than 10 years, 13 years. And our secret is to put everybody together to discuss our challenges and to formulate together. So we are advancing a lot in Brazil in the front of public policies, having this dialogue with all the government, with the executive, with the legislative, with the academia. And I believe that this is the only way to forge our future. It's impossible to overcome our challenges, only the entrepreneurial sector or the universities or the government. We need to discuss how to do it together in order to really overcome our challenges.
Thank you, Gianna. So we are behind the schedule here, but maybe we could go for a final round. And Deborah, I want to see if you have any final comments here or reactions. But the question that I thought for all of you here for our final round is, how can we improve the situation? We got a question here for Iveson about improving the education system in the near future. But I would say, how could we improve, like really make impact? What's the opportunity that we have for that? It can be education, it can be innovation, leveraging technology, involving the universities. But Deborah, I want to turn to you, and maybe we could go for this quick round, final round with our panelists.
Thank you, Roberto. And let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists for really outstanding insights and bringing us into a very deep, rich conversation about this great challenge and opportunity, and also those who have contributed on the chat. A couple things that have really stood out to me in this discussion is, really almost the need to begin to redefine, rethink what is learning. We talk about lifelong learning, continuous learning, but what does that really mean in reality? I mean, young people are concerned about getting a job, what kind of job. Employers want to have people to hire with the skills they need to build their businesses. Society wants, knowledgeable, quote, educated citizens so that they can make, good decisions on public investments, things such as understanding some fundamental issues in science that permeate everything in our culture today. So the need to really rethink about what learning is and what are the platforms, institutions, whatever, that enable or hinder that, I think is emerged in this conversation. And from a competitiveness viewpoint, in the GFCC, we're all about sharing best practices, learning together to advance our respective nations' productivity, standard of living, and growth. But I do think that the speed issues and the technology enablers we've been discussing here in the digital world really provide the reality of what's almost differential rates of learning. Those societies, those regions that are going to create the structures, the conditions that enable young people midstream in their career, people that are in the quote wisdom generation to be engaged in learning, have this differential rates of learning and how it's applied to solve problems, to create value is really the name of the game. And I do think that since we're talking about universities here, there's been so much progress in the new models, the public-private partnerships, the industrial engagement, dealing with how to handle intellectual property. One area where there has not been progress is really around traditional accreditation, how to define and really have some standards, metrics around credentials. It's one thing to say, well, you don't really need a university degree, but I bet everybody on this panel wouldn't tell that to their child, don't bother to get a university degree with the credential that affords. So those are just some thoughts I have for, future things that we want to address. And if you look at the model of personalized medicine, there's been so much talk about that. We are so far away really still from personalized medicine. And yet we know that that's a huge, huge holy grail for lifelong health and longevity and having a meaningful, purposeful life as a human being.
Thank you, Deborah. Let's do this very quickly. Bill, I want to start with you. What is the one opportunity that you see in the near term that we could leverage?
I mean, and just real examples, and you're doing it here today, examples of best practices. How do you get the word out for other universities? We're all in this together. I think Alex would agree. We're all in this together. We're recruiting smart young men and women. How do we leverage what we're doing with industry? How do we share best practices through you and Deborah and others? A lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes are made in 8 years. How do we ensure that other universities don't do that? And there's a big enough pie for everyone. So let's not take at a university, let's not take each other apart. There's a big enough pie for everyone to participate. And again, industry is a partner, not an enemy.
So share best practices. Thank you. Gianna, what's the one opportunity that you see?
Oh, I see so many opportunities. One of the big opportunity for us is to be really part of GFCC that brings to us new connections to universities, to institutions all over the world. And I hope that we can be partners in building this, in framing the future.
Thank you, Gianna. Thank you for being a partner. So partnerships. Ainesh, over to you. What's the one thing that you see that we could do?
I think technology is worth nothing without investing into people who develop it. So I think just using all the acquired data to personalize learning and caring about the output would make a huge difference.
Focus on personalized learning. So thank you for that. Sebastian, what's the one opportunity, one short-term thing that it's doable that you see?
I would say it's just taking this huge problem that we're living right now, the need for reskilling and converting it into an opportunity. And I think it's just working together, thinking about programs that are required, that are needed, investing in people, investing in platforms to scale fast. And I think it's again, thanks a lot, Roberto and Deborah, for this opportunity, because I think it's allowing us also to get to know each other and eventually, have partnerships that we could use to even grow our impact even faster.
Thank you, Sebastian. Sridhar, what's the one thing that maybe we could achieve? What's the low-hanging fruits that you see?
Well, I would say, number one, don't be afraid of technology. It's your friend, right? So I think it's good to ask the right questions, but start doing today, right? Don't wait to start doing things, whether it's your digitization. I mean, we've heard a lot of wonderful things from the panelists, but my view would be speed. And so from a speed perspective, find the one thing that you want to eliminate as a roadblock in why you shouldn't do it, and go do it. Whether you're a student, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an academic researcher, or whether you're in the industry area.
Thank you for your participation and your entrepreneurial suggestion. Alex, you have the final word.
I think, in my mind, everything always starts right with the strategy. So I think organizations need to place digital innovation, digital transformation at the core of their strategies, right? They transcend the whole enterprise, education and research. It has to be at the core in order to drive that change. And complementary with that, the change starts with our people. We talked a lot about the students and learning and research, but we also need to, I think, have a very elaborate strategy of how we enable and develop our own people to actually deliver on that promise, because universities have very diverse workforce of very diverse capabilities and backgrounds and experiences. I think for us to achieve that scale and impact we talked about today, Roberto, we also need to ensure that we have that scale in transforming our workforce, right? In terms of upskilling, reskilling, and our own people, but also transforming the culture of universities, because this also relies heavily on a cultural change as well.
Thank you so much, Alex. My 3 key takeaways: have the people, the functions, the CAO, the CDO, and training your own people. Second, this will only be achieved in a distributed system, working with networks and partnerships. So we need to foster that. And third, start doing and do it quickly, right, Sridhar? So at a speed. So thank you for that. There's one GFCC tradition. We always take a picture here. So please have your cameras on, because we're taking a picture, and we're also, and we have Simone, Riley, and Vanessa, who really made this possible, and were working around the clock to make several things possible in the GFCC. Thank you so much for being here with us. We'll continue the Frame the Future series on the 11th, and we will share here the link for you to share in your networks. We're talking infrastructure. It's not focused on universities, but it's really about how we can use infrastructure investment to advance innovation, sustainability, resilience, partnerships, and inclusiveness. So please join us. Deborah, a final word for everybody?
Just thanking everybody for their leadership, their participation, and for being great innovators.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Don't forget, August the 11th. We have the link that will be shared here if it was not. So see you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye.